Okay, so I guess we're started. And today I have Karen from 2bsirius here, and we're going to do a dialogue, but we're going to do it without video. So this is just going to be an audio dialogue for people who want to listen in. So thanks so much for making the time here, Karen.
Oh, sure. My pleasure.
And so what will we talk about today?
Well, we could talk about existentialism and naturalism, and where they come together and where they seem to differ. Although you are much more of an expert on existentialism than I, so you're going to have to fill in all the blanks on it, because as I've told you, I've read Sartre, but I haven't studied
all of Sartre's work. I mean, he's written.
I've read. Well, let me think of what I've read.
Even Being in Nothingness is such a difficult work.
I know. That's why I say I've read it, rather than I can't say that I've studied it, and there would be a totally different.
Right. Well, maybe just let me say a couple of things about Sartre's Being in Nothingness, and that might be a way to come into some of these issues about naturalism. I think one thing to say, and maybe this clarifies some of the ambiguities from some of the videos that I've posted, it's that, and it's the people who've looked at the Sartre videos, I think this is very clear, but just in general, I think it's a problem for people who aren't that familiar with Sartre, is that the title Being in Nothingness makes it sound like Sartre's offering some kind of dualistic philosophy, and it's really not. It's a tripart ontology, where there's three kinds of being. There's being in itself, being for itself, and being for others. And by being in itself, I think that's kind of what one means by what could be called the natural world independent of consciousness. And, you know, the naturalist view for me there, when I try to talk about it in my own videos, I usually go to dreamless sleep. See, because I think dreamless sleep is an interesting case where my body is just as connected to the atmospheric conditions and just as connected to the physical environment. I mean, I'm still metabolizing, I'm still exchanging air. I mean, my material conditions don't change when I fall asleep, but when I wake up, somehow a world is disclosed, and I experience my body as within that disclosed world.
But, well, the thing that, I can see all that.
So for Sartre, you know, the for itself, it's the waking up is the way that nothingness infects being in itself. And so being in itself would be like dreamless sleep. The for itself is the emergence of consciousness. And then being for others is the problem of how I am an object, a thingly object in the world due to others for Sartre.
Well, I mean, the thing I think that we might get bogged down in if we limit ourselves in that way is, if you take a more naturalistic perspective about what is consciousness, you come to the consciousness can be all sorts of different ways of being. You know, it can be I am conscious now, I am awake now. So if you are in dreamless sleep, you are still conscious in the sense that you have a state of consciousness, but not a state in which you are awake. In other words, Vellman talks about this a lot, and there are a lot of philosophers who have addressed this, that basically different states of consciousness are still within the naturalistic realm, so that, you know, and it's almost as if you're saying that you, in this depiction of dreamless sleep, that you were somehow two things, both conscious and unconscious. And
well, I guess I would just say, I mean, I think part of the difficulty is that I guess I don't really understand anything other than a naturalist paradigm. So I don't think the existentialist position, particularly the existentialist phenomenological position, that is not a supernaturalist position. It's not a contra-naturalism. If anything, it tries to get at what it means to be a body and what are bodies.
Well, sorry, I think I'm being too loud here. The thing is, that I think is still in a naturalistic paradigm.
Let me ask you a question. So someone posted on my video yesterday, I said a marker is just a thing in space and time, and it occupies space and time very differently than an organism does. That is, this marker, I can take the marker, I can submerge it into water, and I can measure the volume of water displaced, and I can sort of give a register, again, of its volume, its size, its mass. Whereas, and that's how it occupies space. Whereas an organism, as having sensory capacity, is a flight beyond itself. It opens a sensory surround, and it occupies space in a very different way than just a thing. To which the person responded, how do I know? And maybe that the marker is registering its environment in some way. Now, is that a naturalist position?
No, of course not.
That to me sounds like hook'em.
It's it sounds like hokum to me.
Yeah, so how do you, how about the person who says there very likely is no God and there's no evidence for God, but they want to believe in a personal afterlife? Is that a naturalist position, or is that more hokum?
No, I think that's hokum too, because you can believe, anyone can believe anything they like. Okay, I can't make someone believe what I, after a lot of research and thinking, have decided works. I can't make anyone adopt my view of the world. The only thing any one of us can do is present the data. And the problem, and I've mentioned this to you before, Iain McGilchrist's book, and I know you probably are tired of me hearing me talk about Iain McGilchrist's book, The Master and His Emissary. But it was in the sense that I have never read a writer who integrated the duality from a neurological point of view that made actual sense. In other words, when we are looking at the electromagnetics of the brain, and then to say that that is the whole of the thought, is to miss a lot of what goes on. So, and I think you would probably agree with that, wouldn't you?
Right. To me, that's one of the main issues of the existential critique. It would be that the neurological grounding for thought, we don't want to dismiss it, don't want to deny it, we want to understand it, but to reductively locate it, all of the action there is to really miss qualia, it's to miss the experiences that are more than brain states. So let's take the example. Okay, so I think we could agree from a naturalist paradigm that olfaction is part of an older part of the brain, and there's chemical reactions that are going on that's very different than sight and hearing. Sight and hearing do have some kind of, I guess, ways that your eyes and ears transform those various light waves and sound waves into electrochemical information in the brain. And we could say that light and color and sound and pitch and tone are basically reducible to electrical chemical states in the brain. Now, as much as that might be true, that it requires a brain to have those, we don't want to reduce the difference of the experience of seeing things and hearing things, because at the level of the electrical chemical activity in the brain, you wouldn't be able to differentiate those qualia of experience.
Yeah, that I think is very valid, and the thing that McGilchrist has delineated better than I've ever read anywhere is that in the 21st century we have become, now he does talk about it left brain, right brain, but he doesn't mean it in that kind of antiquated sense that we used to understand it, that rationality is on one side of the brain and creativity and imagination are on the other side of the brain. He actually breaks down the physiology. He is a medical doctor and a psychiatrist. But he breaks down the physiology and the asymmetry of the brain, and he explains why we have so many problems in the 21st century, we want to be able to, we've made inventories of everything. We've counted everything. We know a lot of the minutiae of everything, and yet we don't have a good way any longer to make big pictures. To integrate all that data into the bigger picture sometimes is very problematic.
Right. Okay, so I don't, I mean, again, I think that's all insightful. I don't disagree with it. I'm trying to maybe chase back some of this larger discussion of how existentialist philosophy relates to naturalism. I mean, I think part of the issue I would want to raise is the degree to which naturalism as an expression, just the philosophical expression, may be over-inclusive in a way that the kinds of phenomenology and existentialist philosophy I'm interested in, they try to deal with the different spatio-temporal contributions of each sense. And so it certainly fits within a naturalist paradigm. But I think what it's going to suggest is that there's been a visual dominance in Western culture, and that visual dominance is now created what's sometimes called the age of the world picture. And the age of the world picture is a reduction of everything so that it has to be to the realm of the visible. And it even takes sound waves, and unless it can see them through an oscilloscope, we say that the sound waves aren't really measurable. And when we get to measurement, they have to be things seen. And I think part of the issue here is the difference between sight and sound. So take the McGilchrist stuff, and when you think about it, sound is naturally integrative and holistic. The kind of part-whole relations found in sound are radically different than part-whole relations in vision. In fact, the more that you think about the difference between the space and time of vision and the space and time of hearing, the more that what he's going to call left brain become. Now, it's not that your eyes are that. You know, that your eyes are basically left brain and your ears are right brain. I think that would be a mistake. But I think the phenomenologist discloses partly how that analytic bias emerged through a prejudice toward visual or ocular metaphors. And it's not just metaphors in language, but reducing things to things seen. And the spoken word, and that's why I think it's fun to do this video just by spoken word, because the spoken word is so different than both the written word, the visual word, but also anything seen.
Well, that I think that is extremely valuable, and in fact, I've been thinking a lot about synesthesia, and I've done it in a context. I'm just almost finished, and I should have already finished it. Embracing the Wide Sky. It's a book by Daniel Tammet, and Daniel Tammet is a high-functioning savant, and there are probably only 50 high-functioning savants alive on the planet right now. And a lot of what he does is because he is able to experience the world synesthetically. In other words, he's not as sense-bound as the rest of us non-geniuses who have to navigate in the world, so that when he hears a number, he can see a shape, and he can create beautiful landscapes within his mind by seeing the landscape of the numbers, or whatever he hears can be synesthetically translated, or it's not that he translates them, they are automatic for him, and his mind is just able to create these synesthetic landscapes that are absolutely beautiful and have multicolors. Now that sounds like he's either on a trip all the time, or we are sense-bound in ways that perhaps we don't understand. And I think that might get back to, I mean, we talked about what are the limits of perception, and are there any limits of perception?
Right. And to what extent is all scientific knowing relying upon taking whatever it is to be studied and rendering it into visible values, whether they're numerical values, whether they're through microscopes, telescopes, through radars, through visual screens. I mean, all kinds of phenomena which are basically not visual get turned into visual representations within science.
I do think, I mean, radio astronomy, we talked about this. Radio astronomy, you can render it as mathematical data, of course. That's the way it's, usually studied. But it's also can be rendered into the visual. So in that sense, radio astronomy is a kind of synesthetic, a sort of artificial synesthesia, in the sense that it's translated from the radio wave and made visual by a correlation. And a lot of atomic microscopic imagery or molecular imagery, we have to assign the colors, for example, to atomic when we're looking at a microscope, we have to assign the colors because they aren't there. In other words, to understand the difference, we have to make them. We don't have to make them visual. I mean, we could make them sound-based, I guess.
Could we?
Probably. In fact, I think there are people.
Yes, we could. With sound that well.
No, because then it becomes art.
Calculus orally.
Yeah, because then for some reason, culturally, we've decided if it's a sound, if it's translated into sound often from the visual, we've created art instead of science. And I don't know why that's true.
Well,
I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and someone can point out to me where I'm wrong, but it seems like that.
Is it possible to do geometry and trigonometry orally? I mean, I think there's a sense in which we have balance and symmetry and dissonance and concordance in sound. We have interval and resonance. But see, this is part of what I'm getting at. Like,
you have to be Daniel Tammet to be. I mean, you'd have to be a high-functioning savant to be able to do high-level mathematics orally. In fact, he can do it. He can do the pi. He can do pi to thousands of places, and he's been checked. He's done it. He's broken the record for it, and it's because he can create these landscapes. He can see the value of pi some other way than I see it or you see it, and we see it by sitting in a room and by rote memorizing.
I have to ask you now again. As much as I find this is a bit. No, we're going to go. I guess a little bit. Now, how are you, I guess I'm interested, how are you defending naturalism right now?
I'm not now.
With this example, this is an example of a person who has invented or discovered mathematics. Are mathematical regularities something that are invented or discovered, and how does this case fit with that?
He's not doing that. He's not doing that. See, that's the way it seems. Really, what he's been born, he was lucky enough. I think he's a very lucky man. I envy him, and I wish I had his the experience he has subjectively. What he's done is been born with. He was born with odd wiring, basically. Now that gets us back to the fact that his brain is not wired the way your brain is or my brain is. It's wired some way that we are trying to figure out.
Can you just answer the question? I mean, do you see it as, does this lend evidence to the person who wants to say that math is invented or discovered?
Oh boy, math is invented or discovered. I've wanted to do a video about this.
Because I think this is a huge issue in the naturalist argument. And I'm also going to add that, for Husserl, who was the father of phenomenology. Now, he's not really the person who I'm most interested in. I like people like Sartre, Merleau-Ponty, Heidegger, a lot of the later existential phenomenologists, but he was a transcendental phenomenologist. He did believe in a transcendental ego, and he had some sense of mathematics. Now, he traced the origin of geometry back to actual work along the Nile, and in some sense he was a radically anti-Platonist in that regard. But I think it raises certain issues again with, I think, as far as naturalism goes, with the question of mathematics.
Okay, with mathematics, the thing is, I find a totally different scenario of mathematics with a lot of philosophy of mathematics people compared to real mathematicians. And it is this. Real mathematicians, and it's especially around something to do with prime numbers, real mathematicians who can actually do the mathematics see that prime numbers there's a reason. I don't know if you know about prime numbers, but they are numbers that hold their value across systems, and they do it in some very strange ways because they seem like objective facts. And that's why, for example, in the movie Contact, the Jodie Foster character discovers a signal from another planet, and it's based on prime numbers. The reason is that prime numbers are, in some sense, the atoms of mathematics. And mathematicians who actually do mathematics can see that these are the discrete. They can't be divided by anything except themselves and one. And that doesn't matter about the number system. So that, in other words, because you get the number 10, because we have a 10-base system,
right,
you can say, well,
system, right.
Yeah, there's a natural, there's something called a natural adjustment that you have to make.
I think this is partly why Fred so likes Spencer's law of form, Spencer Brown's law of form.
I haven't. He mentioned that recently, and I started looking into that because I didn't know about him. And every time
in a lot of ways,
Fred mentions somebody, I go researching it. I love Fred.
This is Sartre's ontology. You have to introduce, and this is very much Burke's. Burke has a whole metaphysical system based on merger and division, but there seems to be a sense in which some people, they think that, and this part, it has to do with theories of communication. If you assume that language is what you use to unite people who are already separate, or if you assume that language is what divides people, you miss it. It's more like language ambiguously both unites and divides people in the same way that we're both separate and connected on countless levels and countless fronts.
Oh, well, that's true. I'm sure that's true. But as far as the mathematics goes, I'm trying to find the book, and I can't, but it's about prime numbers, and it's about the best book that I've read on prime numbers, and he is actually a mathematician. I've stopped reading philosophers on mathematics because I don't think most philosophers of mathematics understand what they're doing enough. But as far as your whether people are connected in some areas and not connected in others, I think that's pretty clear. Yeah, I think, and I also think that we often are sort of playing games without realizing it. I mean, for example, it's like on YouTube, it's always about making the, quote, right argument instead of having an interesting discussion and not knowing all the answers when you go in and learning from the other person and having them tell you things. I just was exchanging comments with somebody who is sure that he knows the truth and I'm an idiot. And I don't contest that. I'm just asking for specifics of what the truth he knows is. I want to check it out myself, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I've been wrong a million times in my life. It doesn't bother me a bit.
Oh, no, I understand. I can totally relate to that. How about I guess maybe we should probably try. We got, we're already been on.
Yeah, we're kind of going around.
We'll go with one last question here.
Sure.
And I think we'll maybe see if we can't circle back to this existentialist philosophy and naturalism. And I do think, I don't think they're really oppositional. I do think there is a sense in which
I think they overlap, but I don't think they're synonymous.
I think existential phenomenologists are oftentimes, again, more interested in issues such as the socio-historical conditions of language and the degrees that the different senses offer a different orientation to space and time. I guess one of the questions that I would still have is, to what extent do you think the naturalist view espouses something like an everything is connected to such a degree that we're in a fully deterministic universe? Because I think the existentialist position is going to be that it's more ambiguous than that we're both connected and separate. There is a problem of nothingness. There's a problem of mistakes and of errors. And So the issue, I think, would be, is the naturalist view one that's committed to a fully deterministic universe?
The naturalist view, I think, in the classical sense of naturalism, would say, yes, it is a fully deterministic universe. But I think there are some, Daniel Dennett has pointed to some problems with that. And, there are compatibilists who say that, does it matter if the universe is completely determined? Something will happen in the future. What that will be, the deterministic universe may know at some level, but I don't think it does, but there could be deterministic factors completely, but it's sort of like the weather. There are surely deterministic factors, and yet we can't predict it, and there are all sorts of things outside of what we can predict. Now, does that mean we'll never predict them? Probably not. Does that mean that human nature is only reducible to certain theorems and to behaviorism? Does it follow, if we have a naturalistic universe, that behaviorism is the only plausible theory? That in fact we are automata, and that we are machines.
Right.
Then.
So I think we're back to this original discussion about how do things occupy space. The argument that a phenomenologist, and I will give Hans Jonas, who's an excellent phenomenologist.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to read him.
Wrote a wonderful book called The Phenomenon of Life, basically a philosophical biology. Another guy named Erwin Strauss, who is a medical doctor, a German phenomenologist. Drew Leader, again, a phenomenologist, a medical doctor.
Right, you mentioned that.
I think what they would say is that vision is a privileged sense, and this is partly why science is so capitalized on it, but that vision may be related to the experience, the qualia of freedom. Now, whether people are metaphysically free or not, that touch is a realm. The realm of touch without sight is a realm without any possibilities. It's a realm of pure actuality. Sound sort of comes upon me without giving me any chance to evade it, whereas the field of vision with simultaneous objects to which a wandering glance gets a freedom to look to things, to look away, and I can see possibilities in the distance, and then the distance in the visual field gets to be a metaphorical relationship to possibilities. I do think the field of vision is in some way related to the human experience of freedom.
I don't quite. I guess I'm just too much of a thoroughgoing naturalist to.
Okay, what does that mean?
I don't know what to make of it. I don't know what to make of what you just said. I don't know.
I'm saying that I think there's a difference between the physical senses. That a worm wouldn't really have the sense of freedom because it doesn't have the sensory modalities we do. I'm giving a naturalist argument.
Well, that's true. That's exactly why I brought in Daniel Tammet.
Okay, what is vision then? How does vision relate to the sense of freedom?
See, the thing is, I just don't understand the question. To me, that seems like a question I'm just not equipped to answer. I don't even know what the question means.
Well, it's that when I say that an organism occupies space, if I take a worm and then I take a clam, and then if I go to various organisms, if I take a plant, it seems like the degree of what its possible involvements could be relate directly back to the sensory capacities it has. That is, the range and scope of involvements that it can be in is related to its own capacities. And
you seem to be having a ladder of being. You seem to be going to. This seems like a ladder of a chain of being argument almost. Is it?
I think in some way it is. I think that this is for Jonas. I think for other people that sight is the
higher on the hierarchy of senses. Is
that's
that
right? That's correct. That is correct.
How much
of science would be possible without sight?
Well, I think it's a sight-based. It's not all sight-based, of course, but I think it is a sight-based.
What percentage of science relies upon the eye?
What percentage of reading relies upon the eye? What percentage of putting eggs in a basket relies on the eye. I mean, I don't understand
I think
the
you're
question.
getting at what we mean by the human world is largely this age picture it's the world of the age picture that's been constructed partly by literacy, but through the visual dominance that's come to pass.
Well, that's exactly why I think people, high-functioning savants like Daniel Tammet are interesting, because he doesn't see as we see, and it's like when you say that sight is a way to freedom or something.
No. What did I? So what I said? I said this is the way that.
Are you going to grade me?
Well, no. I mean, I feel like I'm being misrepresented. I said that
sorry.
the experience that people have of freedom comes from sight. I mean, just look right around right now. When you look, you see a visual field from which you can possibly grab something. Touch doesn't have any possibilities. Touch is a realm of sheer actuality. The possibilities that you can see are you can look where you're not touching.
Well, it's sort of like the two cliches of the blind men in the room with the elephant, and they all, because they're depending on touch, they're not going to get a holistic picture of what they're seeing. So one is going to think an elephant is a trunk, and one's going to think it's an ear, and one is going to think it's a leg. Or the old cliche of in the valley of the blind, the one man eye is king. I mean, I think those do support what you're saying, but I'm not sure how that adds to.
Well, I don't know if those are exactly what I'm saying. I guess, try to see what I'm saying right now. This is going to be fascinating, too, because right now people are just listening to our voices. And the difference between voice and vision are just so fascinating. Its vision offers a field of simultaneous objects which allow for possible selections in action. The realm of touch doesn't know of any such possibilities. The realm of touch is only watch your hand. Your hand is only actually wherever it is, but you can see where it might be, where it had been, where it could be. Language aligns to the visual field in a lot of ways. It's in some ways an extension of all of the senses, and it helps to interrelate them. But I think, and again, the modern, literate sense of Western sensibilities have come to rely upon vision in a way that I don't think it's a non-naturalist view. I think that the point is that the existentialists have tried to reveal the way that the different senses have contributed to what we now take to be our self-understanding or our way of thinking about ourselves in the world. And it's largely a reliance upon vision and visual metaphors.
Well, I think you come back then to McGilchrist, who is basically saying we need a more integrated way of dealing with our consciousness in the world. I mean, it's a brilliant. He should send me like a kickback for this, because I love that book. It's really good. It really made me think. Any book that makes me think, I really appreciate it. And
I think Leonard
McGilchrist
would agree with what you just said.
Yeah,
I think that's part of Swain's stuff.
Well, it's the goddess in the alphabet kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. I agree. And I just want to put in a plug for your book too, Sources of Significance. I thought it was really well done. I did, as I think I pointed out, I enjoyed the beginning. I did kind of get a little bit lost with the evocation of the wisdom of the sands and some of the things you took out of that. But I thought it was a very well done book.
Well, thanks. You're really too kind. And you know what? I really do appreciate you making time. I'm glad that we were able to talk. It was really fun. And I hope that, other people out there who have heard this would be willing to chime in, shoot video responses. I'd love to hear other people's, maybe how they would define what is meant by naturalism, or what is the naturalistic view.
What they are. I mean, how do they self-define? I mean, do people self-define as naturalists? If so, what does that mean to you? Are you a scientific naturalist, a scientific materialist? Yeah. If so, how do you see the world? That's why I wanted people to engage on that philosophy video and the dialogue between Owen Flanagan and Alex Rosenberg, and then the rebuttal from Timothy Williamson. I think that the more we talk about what it is to be a scientific naturalist and how, if we self-identify as one, what does that mean about our worldview?
Yeah, and I'm all for materialism and naturalism as long as it doesn't become reductive and denying of qualia. I think the more that I hear arguments that come to a kind of everything gets reduced to neurophysiology, this is Descartes' paradigm smuggled back in. It's really missing some of the more ontological problems of how the brain is part of an evolution within nature. It's not just that we have brains inside us. Somehow nature evolved brains. I mean, the organisms that are here, those brains, and the difference between like ears and eyes, they're registering differences in the world that they're not just reducible to electrical chemical impulses in the brain.
There's another, McGilchrist is good on this, and also Raymond Tallis has just published a book on this as well that is saying exactly what you're saying, that we are too neurologically literal sometimes.
It's important, and I don't want to understress it, and right now it's hot topic, but I think some people are missing how we are elements of a much larger world, and the brain was evolving to register, to pick up, to differentiate, and to relate to, and to merge with, but also differentiate from aspects of its environment.
Yeah, and I think the thing to do, and it's tedious maybe a little bit, but you have to see who's making a reductionist argument and see if you agree with it and not be told what to think. And I think Alex Rosenberg does the best job on, I think, producing a really coherent book about that. And so if you want to know what reductionism is and what scientific naturalism is, then I think pick up his book. If you want to see people who want you to take a more integrated view, you would go, maybe Owen Flanagan takes a more integrated view. All of these are atheists. I can't think of anybody I'm talking about now who's not an atheist. I haven't named anybody who is in any way a believer in anything supernatural. And so maybe, I mean, as I said, I recently read Karen Armstrong's book as well, The Case for God. And, you know, I mean, I think she has some valid points, but I disagree with her at levels. And it was the same thing with the Spinoza debate. I mean, I just think you don't need to evoke God if there are other explanations, and there are other explanations always, it seems to me. So.
Well,
anyway,
good.
we've really gone a circuitous route. It was fun.
That was very fun.
Take care.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.